Pluto, Vicky was prepared for everything. She always had a pen in her bag if you needed one, and she could stitch back a button immediately if it came off. So, of course, when Emma's heel broke off her shoe, Vicky just took a tube of glue from her pocket and stuck it back on. 42 pounds? They cost me, Emma complained. Vicky nodded as she blew on the heel. You should get some of these, she said. Emma looked at Vicky's lace-up boots and smiled. I don't think so, she said. No, thought Vicky. Their footwear showed the differences between the two girls. Emma Miles, with her high heels and her head in the clouds, and Vicky Reynolds with her heavy-booted feet firmly on the ground. I hate this place, Emma shuddered. Why? Said Vicky, surprised. Elm Walk was a shortcut to the center of town. She'd never really noticed it before. Because it's creepy, said Emma. Vicky looked up and down the road. There were bungalows on both sides. All of them were designed for people who, for one reason or another, could not climb stairs. Elm Walk was always a quiet street. Now, at 8:30 in the evening, it was silent. Vicky noticed, however, that she and Emma were not alone. There was someone behind every single net curtain watching them. Nosy old, Emma said angrily. They're lonely, said Vicky. She looked back at the row of half-hidden faces. We're probably the most exciting thing that's happened all day. There, she said, handing Emma her shoe. Try that. The heel was as good as new. 10 minutes later, Vicky and Emma were standing in front of Stacey's disco. Here again, girls, said the man on the cloakroom desk when they checked in their coats. Of course we are, Harv, said Emma. It's Friday night. As the door opened, a blast of heat, light, and noise struck them. Even though Vicky went to Stacey's every Friday night, it was always a shock. Drink? She heard Emma shouting in her ear. Yes, please, she yelled back. They crossed the dance floor to the bar, with Emma striding ahead. She held her head high and pretended not to notice who was and wasn't there that evening. Vicky knew that she was probably also sucking in her cheeks. This made her cheekbones stand out. Emma was very proud of her cheekbones. By the time they drinks came, she was already lost in giggly conversation with a rugby player she knew, called Jeff. Vicky sighed, sipped from her glass, and wondered whether to buy a pair of high heels after all. The trouble is, she thought, high heels attract the type of man who likes women in high heels, and that was exactly the type of man Vicky tried to avoid. She looked round. The disco was full of them, good-looking, well-dressed, sporty, and dull. Stacey's! I don't know why I bother, she said, and checked the time. At least, that was what she meant to do. Unfortunately, as she raised her arm to look at her watch, Vicky knocked the elbow of the man standing next to her. Although he managed not to drop his glass, he spilt his drink all down his front. He spun round. I'm so sorry, Vicky exclaimed as, red and embarrassed, she searched her pockets for the tissues that she knew were there somewhere. Here we are, she said at last, and began dabbing furiously at his wet t-shirt. It's all right, the man laughed. Honest. I'll get you another drink, said Vicky. What was it? The man looked at her. His eyes were the darkest blue Vicky had ever seen. They seemed to be looking right inside her. Water, he said softly. It was only water. He looked down and pulled the wet cloth away from his chest. For the first time, Vicky noticed the picture on the t-shirt. It was a humpback whale leaping out of the sea. Beneath it, in blood-red letters, the words, Save me! I'm surprised they let you in, she said. T-shirt and jeans and that. She stopped. I'm Vicky, by the way. I'm Peter, he said, though most people call me Pluto. Why? Said Vicky. No, don't tell me, because you're dark and mysterious. He smiled. My surname's Platovsky. Oh, said Vicky, feeling very guilty. It's Estonian, he added. Look, why don't I get something to drink and a couple of glasses? We could find somewhere a bit quieter to talk. Vicky nodded. I'd like that, she said. They found an empty table at the far end of the disco and sat down opposite one another. As Vicky watched him filling the glasses, deep in thought, she began to think that maybe Pluto was the perfect nickname for him. They talked about the ban on whale hunting and dolphin-friendly tuna fishing, about ivory and rhino horn, nuclear testing, and global warming. They discovered they were both vegetarians, both 18, and both single. He was a Gemini, she an Aquarian. On and on they talked, and not once did they run out of things to say. As they shared ideas and swapped stories, Vicky felt more and more confident. She wasn't a crank. There were others out there who didn't laugh at her worries. Or if not others, at least there was someone. Pluto. He even agreed with her theory about the people on Elm Walk. Yeah, perhaps they live through others, he said. Perhaps that's what they're doing when they watch the passers-by looking for a friendly face to share an hour or two of conversation with. Vicky stared at him. What an odd thought, she said. A dark and mysterious thought, Pluto laughed. By the way, he added, I think someone over there is trying to get your attention. Vicky turned to see Emma waving frantically from the exit. She was carrying their coats and pointing theatrically at her watch. It's my friend, Emma, said Vicky. We're late. Pluto nodded. I've got to go too, he said. Look, can I give you my telephone number? Of course, said Vicky, and took from her pocket a pen and some paper. You write it down, he said, 509573, and put Pluto so you don't forget whose number it is. Vicky smiled. I won't forget, she said. Look, I've really enjoyed this evening. She looked round again. I'll have to go before Emma explodes. I'll call you. Do that, said Pluto. I will, she called back over the music. I promise. Vicky didn't keep her promise. She decided to pay him a visit instead. She couldn't wait to see his face, and yet, as she lifted the knocker, she hesitated. What if Pluto wasn't in? What if he'd only given her his number to be polite? She looked round. Someone was watching her from the window opposite. She tapped lightly at the door and waited. Practical as ever, Vicky had written down Pluto's phone number in her address book as soon as she came home from Stacey's. She wrote it under P. P for Peter Platovsky. P for Pluto. Then, unhappy that she had no address to fill in, she looked it up in the telephone directory. There was only one Platovsky listed, and the number was the same. It must be the one. But the address, it was 45 Elm Walk. Why? She asked herself for the umpteenth time. We talked about the road. Why didn't he say he lived there? The door was opened by a stout woman of 50 or so. Her gray hair was tied up in a thick bun. She nodded to Vicky. You are better to come in, she said. Her East European accent was strong, and as they stood in the hallway, Vicky had to concentrate hard to make out what the woman was telling her. Something about a drunken hit-and-run driver, and her Peter being knocked down on his way back from a Save the Whale meeting 10 years ago. Vicky shook her head. She was confused. For once, Vicky Reynolds was not prepared. Stop it, she cried. The woman paused. Sorry to upset, she said gruffly, but this man, 2 years in prison, he gets, and Peter, my darling boy, paralyzed. He is in prison for rest of his life. She turned and opened the door behind her, and there he was, older, but without doubt the same person. It was Pluto. He was sitting in a wheelchair staring out of the window. Mrs. Platovsky turned him round to face Vicky. His mouth moved into a faint smile. Vicky felt uneasy. His face, he can move some, Mrs. Platovsky explained. The rest. She shrugged. Vicky nodded. He's lifting his eyebrows, she said. It is his way to beckon, said Mrs. Platovsky. He wishes to say something to you. Vicky stepped forwards. Her heart was racing. This couldn't really be him. It just couldn't be. She bent down towards his mouth and felt his warm breath against her ear. Pluto says thank you, he whispered. Nouns. Tube, a long, hollow cylinder. Heel, the back part of the foot below the ankle. Lace-up boot, a boot fastened with laces. Footwear, items worn on the feet, such as shoes or boots. Bungalow, a small single-story house. Net curtain, a sheer curtain hung over a window. Cloakroom, a room where coats and other outer garments can be left temporarily. Blast, a strong gust of wind or a loud sound. Rugby, a team sport, played with an oval ball. Cheek, the fleshy part of the face below the eye. Elbow, the joint between the upper and lower arm. Tissues, soft, disposable paper used for wiping or blowing the nose. Humpback, a type of whale with a humped back. Whale, a large marine mammal. Dolphin, a small, intelligent marine mammal. Tuna, a type of fish. Ivory, hard, white material from the tusks of certain animals. Rhino, short for rhinoceros, a large, thick-skinned mammal with 1 or 2 horns on its snout. Horn, a hard, pointed projection on the head of certain animals. Directory, a list of names, addresses, and other information. Knocker, a metal ring or bar used for knocking on a door. Attention, mental focus or awareness. Verbs, complain, express dissatisfaction or annoyance about something. Nod, move the head up and down to indicate agreement or understanding. Blow on, expel air from the mouth forcefully onto something. Shudder, shake involuntarily, usually due to fear or cold. Strike, hit forcibly or violently, Yell, shout loudly. Suck, draw in by or as if by suction. Sigh, exhale audibly to express relief, exhaustion, or disappointment. Sip, drink slowly in small amounts. Exclaim, cry out suddenly, especially in surprise, anger, or pain. Embarrass, cause to feel awkward, self-conscious, or ashamed. Dab, press against something lightly with a piece of absorbent material. Leap out. Jump or spring suddenly or forcefully out of something. Stare at, look fixedly or vacantly at someone or something. Explode, burst or shatter violently. Hesitate, pause before saying or doing something, typically through uncertainty. Tap, strike lightly with a sharp blow or sound. Beckon, make a gesture with the hand, arm, or head to encourage someone to come nearer. Shrug, raise and lower the shoulders in a gesture of indifference or uncertainty. Step forward, move forward, especially with confidence or resolve. Bend down, lower the body or top part of the body forward or downward. Whisper, speak very softly using one's breath rather than one's throat, especially for secrecy or to avoid being heard. Stitch back, sew together again. Glue, stick together with adhesive. Stick back, reattach using adhesive. Spin round, turned quickly or suddenly. Adjectives, creepy, causing an unpleasant feeling of fear or unease. Giggly, prone to or characterized by giggling. Dull, lacking interest or excitement. Unfortunate, having bad luck or unfortunate circumstances. Mysterious, difficult or impossible to understand, explain, or identify. Guilty, culpable of or responsible for a wrongdoing. Opposite, situated on the other side or at an angle of 180 degrees. Confident, feeling or showing confidence in oneself or one's abilities. Stout, somewhat fat or of heavy build. Umpteenth, occurring for the indefinite but very large number of times. Faint, lacking in strength or clarity. Uneasy, not feeling comfortable or secure. Adverbs, ahead, in front of or before in space or time. Furiously, in an extremely angry or energetic manner. Theatrically, in an exaggerated dramatic manner. Drunkenly, under the influence of alcohol. Gruffly, in a rough or hoarse manner. Immediately, without delay. Frantically, in a hurried or frenzied manner. Unfortunately, regrettably, or unluckily. Prepositions, back, to or toward the rear or past position. Phrasal verbs, come off, became detached or separated. Break off, snapped or separated abruptly. Live through, experience and survive a difficult situation. Make out, discern or understand something, especially with difficulty. Knock down, strike to the ground. Check in, register one's arrival at a hotel or airport. Stand out, be easily noticeable. Look round, glance around or survey one's surroundings. Pull away, move or draw back suddenly or forcefully. Call back, return a telephone call. Write down, put thoughts, ideas, or information on paper or in a document. Fill in, complete a form or document with requested information.
Paralyzed, unable to move part or all of your body or feel it.